And we are live.
Okay, welcome to our meeting of the CPC Rules Committee on April 3rd, 2024. It's 6:05 p.m. and call the meeting to order. I'd like to start with a roll call. Commissioner Benito.
Present.
Commissioner Wong.
Present.
And I am Commissioner Van Leer, and I'm present. So, basically, the agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to focus on the evidentiary manual, starting with hopefully a presentation from Mr. Goodrick and Mr. Virat, and then we can have some discussion around any issues we see, any changes need to be made, and the process going forward.
I just want to make sure that we are actually live here.
Okay.
Didn't know we were not.
Well, sometimes it says it on here, but I always verify that it's.
Oh, okay.
Really,
Is the camera straight? Because it's been not straight.
Yeah, it's
Oh, really?
straight. It's straighter than it's been in a while today. Doesn't always stay that way, but it gets knocked around a lot. All right, coming to the front. We are live and audio is broadcasting. So.
Great. So here we are. We've got a quorum. 3 or 4 members are here. Any comments on the agenda? Okay. Also welcome Co-Chair Zayed
Thank
and Mr. Walker from staff. Is there any public comment?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, so we'll skip right ahead. Oh my gosh, we're so far ahead of schedule. Woohoo. All right, so, okay, we'll wait till we can get whoever that is in.
What's that? Oh, you're still there? Okay.
Yeah, Jesus.
As I'm running up there to open the door.
Okay, so, Mr. Goodrick and Mr. Gila, if you'd like to start us off, and I don't know if you have a presentation you want to run through, or just wanted to
We
start
do.
talking. Yeah, okay.
And so, before I introduce Martin, I'll just tell the community here that if they go to the website, if they're watching and they go to the website, and they do the drop down menu, get involved, you'll see our calendar. And if you look at today, the Rules Committee meeting, you will see the materials that are being discussed and the PowerPoint presentation. They are both online. So once again, it's clecpc.org, and then the drop down, get involved, go to our calendar, click on today's, or if you're on the YouTube, and you can see I put a link in the YouTube comments about today's meeting to get to those materials as well. So the public should be able to follow along because it'll be a lot of discussion about what we're looking at. So it was important to have that up there today as best I could. So this is a historic moment for the CPC and a big step forward for the community. It's not the first time that civilians will be involved in the discipline process. CPRB has been around since the 80s. 1988 was when Ohio Supreme Court gave them final consent to move forward, and that was the first time in Cleveland citizens heard as a body disciplinary matters for police. However, this is historic in a lot of ways because you are now the final authority on discipline matters with the Cleveland Division of Police. So, of course, out of the gate and creating a process from scratch for you, obviously there were a lot of things you had to do before you got to this point, but here we are. People can debate the time it took to get here or whatever. History can judge you for that, but here you are. You've only been in business for roughly 14 months, and you are ready to decide how you are going to hear police disciplinary cases. We have a employee who many are aware, but just for the public, I will kind of explain how this works, who is a shared employee between the law department and the CPC being their client. He reports to a division in the law department that is isolated from the predominant work of other entities in the law department, and he is the primary author of this draft in conjunction with myself, because we had to give you something to start, somewhere to start. But the idea of this, I started working on talking to people and fleshing this out and having discussions with people in the industry and people in the DOJ, the monitoring team, before we even got here, before you were even seated, those discussions happened. So I sat down with Martin, I kind of gave the ideas that I've talked about in the past and some general parameters. And he came up with the draft, and it took us maybe roughly a month of back and forth, maybe a little within give or take a week of that, to come up with this here. So that's where we're at. That's what we get paid to do, is to help you get a jump start. That being said, it's yours to make it what you want. You can consult with who you want, right? This is not a mandate to you that you accept anything that we wrote down. You could throw it in the garbage can and start from scratch if you so choose. This is your world. This is what you have to live with, but you do need something to start you in that direction of moving forward. And since no one has presented anything as an alternative, this is what you have. So that being said, I will turn it over to Martin Belot, our CPC legal counsel.
Hello, commissioners. How's it going, everybody? Good? Good. I am so excited for today. It's like my Christmas. So thank you so much for taking the time to review the very lengthy manual that I sent to Commissioner Van Leer, who then distributed to you all. Like Jason said, this is just a beginning sort of ground level setting for us as we move through the accountability process. You can build it up, you can strip it down, you can do what you got to do. If you have questions on, how does this policy work with the law, I'll be able to try to navigate with you as best as I can in the moment. If I need to research something, I'll research it. And if there's a conflict, we can kind of work on that together and see what we all want to do with it after that. As a general setup for the manual, it walks through two different processes at the very beginning. There is a process for internally discovered complaints. So when there is a complaint that is discovered by the Division of Police itself, or through internal affairs, and then without an outside complaint, that's called an internal complaint. And then there's a second section that talks about external complaint, where somebody from outside the city would submit a complaint about a police officer that would then get investigated by OPS and then go up through the CPRB and then possibly to us. So there's two different tracks. And then the third track, I guess, is kind of a third track. It would be if somebody came to us directly with a complaint, didn't go to CPRB first, it wasn't internally discovered. And you kind of just have to see where that would go. Does this person then need to go to OPS before they come to us? Does this person need to, then it would just go through that process. But I did go through the really long manual and pulled out certain sections, which I definitely want your feedback and draw your attention to. Again, any part of the manual is open for discussion or referral or whatever, but there are some key portions that I did want to highlight because I think they're certainly worth a lot of discussion in this committee and elsewhere. So again, this is sort of like the workflow that I was designing when we were talking about the CPC's accountability workflow. Sorry, it's kind of small, but basically saying that there is internal complaint, external complaint, and then direct appeal to CPC. The accountability committee first reviews these complaints, and it'll look at internally the notices that Jason receives. I think are they called like disposition notices or something, or it's like a divisional notice that's called a certain thing.
The notice that talked about what discipline had been given to officers.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the disposition letters.
Disposition letters.
They're normally called disposition letters. They're
Okay.
sometimes called discipline letters. They're also sometimes called other things. But I think now that it's pretty standardized, so they call them.
Right.
They call them. I just blanked on the word that we just said. The disposition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So essentially, the accountability committee and the staff will be perusing those notifications when they come through, looking for cases that could be good fits for the commission, and they will bring those cases up in accountability committee meeting. And the same thing for the CPRB for externally discovered complaints. They're watching CPRB meetings, they're looking when they're coming to final decisions, and they're going, oh, this might be a good case for us to take, and they'll put it on the agenda for the accountability committee. And then the direct appeal to CPC skips those kind of processes because we know we're going to be taking that case. It's then discussed in the accountability committee. They are going to make a decision on whether to recommend the case for the full commission to hear or to recommend to dismiss the case. They are going to request a case file. They're going to receive those documents, and then the executive director is going to prepare a case package that is going to describe the general facts of the case, is going to inventory the case files, it's going to make recommendations, and then that is going to be given to the accountability committee. And if they want to go with a full hearing, the accountability committee has the ability to modify that case package before it goes to the full commission with their own recommendations or additional documents they need. Once it comes in, the committee reviews the case package and recommends to the full commission. The full commission votes on whether to hold a full commission meeting or not. Then they send out notices. There is a brief structure that is created inside of the manual. So instead of us having all of the documents be thrown on us during the actual hearings, we have briefs so we can see what people's arguments are before they come in. We can see what documents they want to bring in so that we can kind of understand that structure before we actually hit the ground running in the hearing. You have the hearing. The briefs are shared online, of course, to the public. And then there is a final decision that the commission makes on whether to increase discipline, to enact new discipline if no discipline was made in the first place, in limited cases to decrease discipline in cases of whistleblower claims or something like that, or to just stick with the same thing and say, you know what, we're not going to change the standard at all. So that's the general workflow.
I have a question. Do you want questions now, or do you want
to? Let's just save them because I have a whole bunch to get through real quick, but I will take them at the end. So another thing I wanted to shout out about the manual is that we needed to make a amendment to 2.4.4, which is the process for receiving complaints by a person. So there used to be a little bit longer, a lengthier process for 2.44 that we sort of needed to reduce in order to make it work better with the manual. So take special note of that. In the actual manual, we have to use a standard to say when the accountability committee is going to be able to refer a case to the full commission or to dismiss. So I put in a standard that could possibly work for us if the accountability committee decides a majority vote that sufficient facts exist in a case that may warrant the full commission modifying a discipline decision. I needed to think of something a little bit lesser than a preponderance of the evidence because that's a standard we're going to be using at the full commission. So we'll see if this is going to work and we can modify that. There's also a significant sort of process that's outlined for a lot of our due process requirements. A lot of people are thinking, you know, do we need cross-examinations? Do we need to have a court reporter here? Well, not typically in a employment discipline meeting or hearing would you have cross-examination like that or court reporters like that. The city in certain cases does allow for it, and I believe it's mostly because of this requirement of ORC 2506.01, which is basically outlining the individual's appeals rights after our commission would hear a case. So at any time, once we have made a decision, we have made our final decision, they're allowed to appeal to common pleas and to say, you know, we want somebody else to hear this. If we did not provide these extra due process procedures, then they may be able to open up the scope of the case beyond what they just submitted to us and what we heard. Now, if they waive that right, then it would also it would keep the record closed. So in the process that I create in the manual, I have a section that kind of gives them notice to say, hey, you have these rights, you waive them if you don't enact them or ask for them. Is this the best process? Is this what we want to do? Do we want to just give these people these due process rights in the very beginning? That's something that this committee can discuss. Brief compositions, what should be in the briefs, and how they should be organized. What should the formats be? And then a comment that I received too is, does the officer have adequate access to possible case comparisons? We really have to think about our process for putting together the briefs. That is the staff, how is the staff going to be inventorying cases to compare to? Is that process something that should also be open and available to the officers that are coming before the commission? Of course, I think the starting basis is the divisional notices that contain the disposition letters that they would have access to because they're also receiving divisional notices. But what is our process going to look like? And should it be open and transparent? The evidentiary hearings themselves, what is the format going to be? This is just a recommended or a sample agenda. Our current quorum standards, do they need to be upped in these situations? Do we need to be asking for a higher quorum than we are considering at just special or full commission meetings? And then also when it comes to public comment, at what point are we going to be allowing for public comment? How many times? Public comment is something that is very important to this commission. Obviously, it's the CPC after all. But you also want to set a stage for unbiased decision making, right? And you kind of have to balance that. The actual standard to overturn a decision. So mostly the CPC is going to be looking at the decision, the discipline decision, and saying, does this discipline decision go far enough when it is compared against similar cases that are under the same discipline matrix, and making a primary decision on that. In addition to that, I believe that there could be room for a catch-all. So just limiting the commission to looking at the discipline matrix, does that really serve the purpose of 115.5 when it shouts out that this commission must be tied to the needs and concerns of the community? So just because a decision was within the realm of the discipline matrix, does that mean that should be what is standing for this community? So thinking about a catch-all, how do we limit the catch-all, maybe creating factors. I put together some sample factors for us to consider if we wanted to consider a catch-all at all. The recusal process, I know there's been a lot of discussion about the recusal process. So we went through a lengthy debrief on what kind of procedures are going to be in recusal, what we should be looking out for, the difference between mandatory recusals and self-identified conflicts, the process for investigating those conflicts of interest and seeing if they're warranted or not, and then potential fallouts and repercussions for not following them. So we'll definitely want to pick through that as well. And then that's the end of the presentation. So just put a pin in all of those important areas in addition to all of the other stuff that's in this manual. And I understand that it's long. If we want to cut it back, we are welcome to cut it back. But I know that we are looking for more structure than less. So, all right, that's it for me.
Okay, Jason, do you have anything else to add?
Nope. Okay.
Well, we can just ask questions, I guess. So my first question was in slide 2. If you go to slide 2, just want to understand the reasoning. You talked about a direct appeal to the CPC. I think it was slide 2.
All right, hold on.
Yeah, that one. So the direct appeal that bypasses accountability goes straight to the ED, and you sort of said it's definitely going to be taken, but just because there's direct appeal, I mean, just to understand the reasoning, like, why does that mean we have to take it?
So these first steps here, this step, and this step, are all about the work the accountability can do before it requests the case file. So requesting the accountability committee requesting the case file, in my mind, is a really big deal. Once it requests the case file, now the case is being so strongly considered that the full commission should be able to weigh in on the case being dismissed. Okay? So this direct CPC appeal is saying this person is going to skip all of these steps of the accountability team reviewing it and possibly dismissing the case without getting the case file. It's going right to the stage of accountability is going to take it, and it's a case that's going to be viewed by a full case file and then decided to be dismissed by the full commission.
And if I can add, it has to do with how we find out about the case, right? So you're looking at, in that thing there, the direct appeal to CPC is someone walks through our door, which we've had 2 instances of, right? And says, I want you to look at this case, right? The other side of this is when we want to look at a case, regardless of if a community member brought it to our attention or not. So as Martin mentioned briefly, that has to do with coming up with a process, and it's in accountability's scope of work already, right? When the division sends us divisional notices and things like that, the accountability in conjunction with the staff scans those, right? And they can find cases that seem like they are eligible for CPC without needing a community member or waiting for a community member to come, right? Part of their duty is to look at that. So this side, and all that means is we can look at when it says internal or external. Internal would be we look at internal divisional stuff, and then external means we look at CPRB stuff, right? But that is us self-scanning, and the self-scanning, when we initiate it, has a different process. That is when the accountability then empowers the executive director to then take those steps because they're doing it on their own. And once it crosses that threshold, it has a different standard in Martin's mind. That's when it actually starts. So you're allowed to talk about cases, consider cases, but once you say to the staff, we're making this official, and we are now considering this being a real case for us, it crosses a legal threshold that takes us to another level. The other side, we automatically do that because the community member came to us, and so it's coming to us either way. You have to deliberate. These are self-chosen.
This chart was super helpful. I think that it would be great to include it in the manual. Right now, the direct appeal of the CPC is just 2 sentences at the end of the externally discovered misconduct. I think that it would be good to have its own section. I don't think it's going to be a very long section, but I think it would be good to have a 2.6.1.3 that says direct appeal to the CPC. And I know that you're kind of referencing it to Rule 2.4, but Rule 2.4 doesn't kind of talk about the fact that it automatically requests a case file, and that then the accountability committee must discuss it, and that it must go to the full commission for a vote on whether it goes to evidentiary. Are you pointing?
It does say that.
Where does it say that?
Well, it says, executive director will ask for the case file within 2 working days, and then it follows 2.6. So automatically he will, request the case file, and then it goes to 2.6.
I just think that the way that was just described in the other sections on internally discovered misconduct and externally discovered misconduct are much longer and walk you through. And I think that if in this chart we're laying out these are the 3 different ways that this process is being handled, then I think that we should have a 3rd section that specifically says.
You could just renumber the sections and just put everything under one banner, that has the 3, so it's not separated at this point.
Okay, it sounds like you disagree, and that's okay. My just suggestion is that we lay that out a little more clearly, and that we kind of explicitly give that reasoning that it once it's, that this is handled differently.
Chair. Is that right? Just maybe it would be helpful if I see the problem when I look at that design is we don't call that in 2.4.4, I don't think the header is direct appeal to the CPC, so I think aligning the terminology is something we should look at.
Yeah.
If that's what we're calling it when a citizen comes in as a direct appeal, we should just standardize that so that it tracks that way. So that's something we can figure out is aligning the terminology to make sure we're all on the same.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so under externally discovered misconduct, it's the second to last paragraph. It says if the accountability committee decides by majority vote that sufficient facts exist in a case that may warrant the full commission modifying its discipline decision, that they can, that by a majority vote that it sounds like that if it says that then they can, that there's two options. They can either just send it straight to the CPC for a vote, or they can request the case file. I thought, so are we saying that in certain situations, the accountability committee would be going just off of things that they've read or heard about the case and sending it? Because that just seems a little bit, I was a little confused about that. Could you explain that?
Yeah, through the chair, I did exactly that. You're correct. I left that in there for emergency circumstances. Significant document delay.
Right.
And if there is community pressure on us to say, this case or not, we shouldn't be like, oh, we can't make the decision and accountability until we get the documents. Like, if we know we're going to take this case based on the divisional notice that we read, I mean, you could reasonably assume that sufficient facts could exist if you read a divisional notice or whatever. Or yeah, and maybe we have a document or two. We don't have the full case file. You know, I don't think that would be the standard process, but I left it in there for emergency purposes. So maybe we could consider making that more delineated.
Okay, so just so that I'm kind of understanding, so that would happen. So let's say the case file is requested, but they don't get the case file because of the document delays that we're currently seeing. Then the accountability committee could say, you know, we've seen what we need to see, we're sending this. Which I think we need some sort of guardrail on that right now, just because we are seeing these significant delays is a nice way of putting it. But I wonder, I guess I'm slightly worried about, I would almost say that we should name that, like maybe if, 15, whatever, how many days, they're supposed to have 21 days to fulfill a request, is that correct?
So this is where my brain is different. Under the consent decree, they're being allowed 21 days, but under the charter, it's without delay.
Without delay, okay.
21 days is a number that the federal court is okay with. It doesn't mean that under local rules, it's acceptable to us, right? So I think that is why Commissioner Wong pressed for outside counsel that can look at this at the local level, because what's being debated is people, we're not a party to that debate.
Right.
We don't get to influence the court in any way, and that's a federal judge's determination. And he's not looking at what the charter says. He's looking at what
Federal law says.
what the consent decree should, in his mind, work like.
So I would almost suggest that we put some number of days, that if after requesting the case file, the case file has not been received after X amount of days, at that point, then the accountability committee can make a recommendation to the full commission without the case review. Obviously, I'm open to discussion on that point, but I think that I would want the accountability committee to have that to make that decision without seeing the files, only if we can't get the files, and not just in any kind of like hasty way.
Anybody? You agree with everything in here?
And I'm open, I mean, It is interesting that we're discussing things for a committee that has the primary task of understanding the system and also working through the system. We're not in that committee, so I will have to deliberate with my committee members. And I think that probably I said before, that this should go through accountability. I offered to collaborate from the very beginning, and I offered appellate attorneys that could have written this, not to say that you're not capable, but just so we are at this. I'm just here to listen to the Rules Committee and have, I guess, that discussion and accountability with the actual committee members that have that experience. So, I mean, otherwise you would have to pick an arbitrary date. And Mr. Goodrick is right that there isn't. What does immediate mean? What does it mean? And how do you enact the local charter authority, which is, from my view, why I've been trying to put up that motion for Mr. Tobert's case for 4 times. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm happy to keep listening to this discussion.
Right. Also, as we go through, I did get some feedback from. I sent this out to a few community members. A couple of them are here. Sergeant Richard Jackson and Kayla Pincus. We haven't gotten to any of the places where their feedback was received yet, except Ms. Pincus did want some information about how the document was created. I know Jason, Executive Director Goodrick, did kind of go over that. Do you feel like those questions were answered sufficiently, or did you want? Okay, cool. And I'll put in their feedback when we get to that place. But so I mean, do we want to make changes to this document as we go?
I mean, I would say if you have clear changes that we can suggest and discuss, yes, but
Yeah.
otherwise, we've been raising questions. I think those are good ones to take into consideration. And
Yeah, I have probably like 6 or 7 specific changes I wanted to make.
are they substantive, like, of course?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but that first one is, I mean, I do think having a number of days, I mean, I'm curious what you guys think about that. I don't love the idea of the accountability committee just bypassing the case file.
Through the chair, I just would say that there isn't anything in the manual that would say that you could proceed with even drafting the briefs without the case file. You can't have the hearing without the case file. So everything would have to be in for those processes to actually occur before we have the hearing. So for me, it was just a door that was left open for fast tracking this process if there are document delays. But if we need to rein those in and put days down, I have no problem with that.
The day thing too is a double-edged sword, right? Because learning from the past, when I put the 14 days, which we've heard a lot about, right? The 14 days, we put ourselves in violation of something that really isn't even in existence, right? So the only thing we violated is our own idealism that we can reasonably do something in 14 days without considering, that other people have a hand in that. And so even with our best intentions, when we say we want to do this in 15 days or we would like this happen in 10 days, I think we should give ourselves some grace, recognizing that everything isn't completely in our control. So where we have control, we can put some days on it, right? But they can delay a document and they could say, you know what, we want to take you to court on this document in the future, right? Let's say the consent decree's gone, say they don't want to give us something. We can end up in court. It could take years to resolve a document issue, So I think we need to consider those facts and set dates as targets, but also give ourselves grace to be adaptable when we don't hit our dates or we don't, or it's out of our control, right? So just having that plan in and the conversations that have been raised at accountability here, all of those things, I think Martin's trying to show that he's paying attention to what's going on and write that in, right? So let's learn from what we're seeing. Another thing is these are editable by you at any time, right? So as you put this into practice, If you find something's not working, the right answer is to take it back and fix what's broken, because you're the artist, so you can do that. To the point of what committee should this go through, this is a commission, right? I want to say this again, it's a commission. This idea of competitive committees doesn't exist unless people want it to exist in their mind. Any commissioner could be here tonight to work on this. We're not passing anything tonight. It's just impossible to pass a 20-page document in just a 2-hour read. So there's plenty of time to shop this to whatever brains you want. There's plenty of time for other commissioners to read it. This is just starting of a conversation, right? And it is a rule, and rules go through the Rules Committee. It doesn't mean you can't partner with other committees. I think there's several commissioners here that are participating in both committees. So in a way, both committees are involved. So having the chair of accountability here is, and as to her point, I'd like to take this back to my committee. Well, that's valid. Take it back. The other thing is, no one has introduced anything. So the blame game doesn't need to happen. Like, anyone who thought they had a better idea for a hearing for the last 13 months had at any time the ability to bring a draft to the Rules Committee at any time, right? It didn't happen. So here we are. We have a draft to consider, right? But there was nothing stopping. There was no force in the universe that could have stopped somebody from creating a hearing idea on their own and moving that forward and putting it into suggestions. So here we are. We have a draft. We have lots of time to consider it. However, we do know that we may have to do a case. So you have to balance your ability to figure out what you want to do with the fact that we have business that needs to be done, and the community's telling you, start moving forward that business. So don't take too long.
Commissioner, that we run through your questions and we'll keep moving. So just
Okay.
keep going with your questions.
What's my,
And whatever input you have, we'll just focus on.
I did see Commissioner Long had their hand raised.
Yeah,
Okay.
just stick with this.
Okay, so I just made a note that we will need to change our rule about the full commission voting, which you already noted. I guess one question that I had is for the scope of the CPC's review on criminal parts of it, and I wasn't totally clear on if a case has a criminal element. So I think that one of the ones that we're likely to see and that you see other commissions around the country engaging in are things related to sexual assault, sexual harassment, and domestic violence cases with officers. And so when I read this, I didn't totally understand how that fits into this process, because it says that, the criminal portion can be referred to the city's prosecutor, and if those cases if it wasn't already investigated by IA, but am I understanding that if a case has already been investigated by IA, if the city prosecutor's office has already been involved in some way in investigating it, at that point, can it still go through the regular externally discovered misconduct?
So here's what I'll say about that. Why is that in there? What we know is sometimes IA doesn't investigate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you may see a case where it was a violation of civil rights, and these are mostly misdemeanors that they leave on the table.
Yeah.
Dereliction of duty, right? Things that are very clear under the law when they're violated, right? But sometimes the city just, even excessive force, they don't charge an assault, right? They'll just take it through an administrative track, right? Citizens, not just this commission, have the right under Ohio law to petition judges and prosecutors if they see a crime that was committed, right, directly. So the idea that if the police always have to be involved is a falsehood. So if you see elements of crimes, and you'll get used to over time what crimes are and aren't investigated, right? If you see a crime being treated as an administrative offense, and it's very clear and obvious, what this is giving you the ability to do then is to raise your issue directly with the city prosecutor, right? So you don't have to give it to IA and say, investigate this, because IA is a made up thing. Let's just be clear about it. But IA doesn't exist in Ohio Revised Code. It doesn't exist anywhere. So we're putting a lot of faith in the system of police investigating themselves. So one of the things that we've heard over the years, and nationwide, it's a thing, is stop letting police be treated administratively when they broke the law. Treat them the same I would be treated if I broke the law, right? So this is just a way to put it in practice. Commissioners screening for that, for common things that aren't treated by the division as crimes that they investigate. You know, excessive force, dereliction of duty, violation of civil rights, all Cleveland Municipal Code things. To your point, the larger felonies are usually investigated.
Right,
So you most likely won't see a major felony come before you that wasn't properly investigated, but you will see small Cleveland misdemeanors that never even got a case opened on them. They were treated the whole time as.
So to be clear though, it says additionally, the CPC scope of review is limited to non-criminal issues. Criminal issues should be referred to the City of Cleveland's Internal Affairs Division. However, the CPC may refer cases directly to the city prosecutor for further investigation if INA has declined to review a matter for criminal violations. So I'm imagining, let's say that there's a sexual harassment claim or a sexual assault claim or a domestic violence claim or an officer involved domestic violence claim. If the community member is coming to us and saying, I don't believe that this officer received sufficient discipline connected to the domestic violence that they had, that they put me through, then my understanding is that then this sentence would say that we could not review that case because that would be a criminal issue. Or are you saying that the review of the officer's discipline related to that is separate from the criminal issue?
Right, you're talking about, if you're saying you believe the sentence prohibits you from applying discipline, that's not the intent of the sentence. So you'll have to discuss that with Martin, the wording of the sentence, right? But that's not what this is. So it doesn't stop you from doing a disciplinary case that had a criminal element to it, right? It doesn't stop you at all. What this is for is that if you see that they neglected doing the criminal part, and it's so obvious that the criminal part was there, and the division was aware of it, and they made a choice. So if you ask the executive director, can you check and see if they ever even did a criminal invest on this? If the answer is no, right, then you have options, right? You can either say, well, it's so obvious based on what we have. We're not investigating criminal activity, so that's not what we're doing. But sometimes it's so obvious. You have it right in front of you and say it's right there. You can consult with the prosecutor directly and ask them to do it. Or you can, in some cases, even file an affidavit yourselves, right? You work with legal counsel to do that. But it's just saying don't ignore it when you see it. That's what the emphasis of this is, right? Don't feel that you are stuck in the same systemic problems that the rest of the world seems to be stuck in, where you don't have an option because you do have an option. Ohio law even gives people the option to do that if they believe it happened, go right to the judge or right to the prosecutor. So as a commission, you certainly have that same right to do so if you see it. But I wouldn't say do that in a vacuum. You know, if you're considering that, talk to our legal counsel, and if we need to, get external counsel on it, right? So
What do you think about that sentence? Because I understand, because, you know, it says, however, the facts beyond degrees of or application of discipline, however, facts beyond the degrees of or the application of the discipline must remain outside the purview of the commission. So that's referring to that we can't decrease discipline. But yeah, I think that to me, this, maybe nobody else feels this way, but I think that I would like something that says that, you know, cases with a criminal element such as domestic violence, sexual assault can still be heard, but our scope can only be on that, you know, looking at the discipline of the officer.
Yeah, I think through the chair, the sentence, there is no limiting sentence because I think that was implied. We can add a sentence to that effect that makes you feel more comfortable. I have no opposition to that. This sentence about the criminal issues not being included is to specifically call out that this is not a prosecutorial body, right? We're not pressing charges on anybody. So that's just mainly what it's in there for. But as Jason said, there there could be times where things are obvious to this commission and we need a process for how to handle that. But yeah, I'm open to any language you want to pitch.
Pete, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, if there's some clarifying language, I think that makes sense. I mean, if you want to suggest it, or if you all want to workshop it, you know, just have to do it right now, or you could throw in a sentence, we could make an amendment right now.
I mean, if I'm the only one who read it that way, then maybe it's not necessary, but
And to the chair, it's not necessary to, I mean, we can make a change, you don't have to do formal amendments.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, this isn't on the floor as a motion, it's
No,
just introduced.
This is a process, a process, so I don't see any problem with, if it clarifies, you know.
it's limited to non-criminal issues, although there may be criminal elements to the case. In the incident or something like that.
Your thoughts?
Martin, you may want to explain that something that could qualify for a crime can still have civil or, I guess, analogous administrative measures, right? So sexual harassment, for example, you can go to criminal court for it, or you can go to civil court for it. So I don't believe that that is, I think maybe the word issues is the issue, is the problem,
Is the issue?
is the issue.
Yeah, I think that's more, yeah.
Because what she's saying, what I'm hearing her say is that there could be something that could qualify as a criminal matter that could still inform the administrative process, right?
Right, so maybe switching out the term for elements or
Matters is usually.
matters.
Yeah, matters.
Or standards or whatever, you know, what is, and maybe if you could explain the difference in standard for whatever this video has asked for, what are the elements, and that would be some, maybe further training we need for that.
I think standards is good.
Like we
Or
can't, we're not a court, so we
Right.
can't enforce a criminal standard, even if it exists, even if the elements of the crime were in the administrative matter.
I think I like standards more.
Really?
It's like the scope of review.
Seems more like matters would be.
I think matters is what's used in
Yeah.
courtrooms a lot, right, they call it matters.
Standards implies there's a bunch of standards that are, we're not reviewing standards, we're looking at things that come up, specific crimes, right? Or non-crime, no,
I do, if I
charges
may,
that are not criminal.
I think there's another issue that might be more salient than just changing the word. Could you explain, Martin, how normally does the administrative process have to follow the criminal process? Say, we did discover in a case, whether it was wrongfully investigated or whatever, that it should qualify for going to a prosecutor. Do we have to defer to that authority first before we can act and proceed with the case? What is the normal?
Well, if it's
what
found
the-
first, it does have to go through the criminal investigation process first.
If say IA somehow didn't go through an IA process, right, and for whatever reason, and we still think that there is a criminal standard that has been met, in, what's it called, whatever, what will we do in that case? I think that is probably, especially if it came not through internal affairs too, but it's possible we can get a case with criminal, elements coming from OPS, coming directly to us. You know, because the prosecutor has the discretion to, even if there's criminal standards or elements there, they can reject or not take the case, right? So what do we do then? I mean, obviously we tell them we can only deal with the administrative matter. Do we have to pick it back up, or what does the legal system say about that?
I think it's like probably really situational. I can see a lot of nuances depending on, you know, how it was discovered or what kind of case, and you know, so I think maybe it's best to handle those on a case by case basis. But I do know that, you know, there could be problems with moving forward with a case of our own before a criminal case has been decided. I mean, you don't want to have, they're not going to be making self-incriminating statements, and if there's a criminal case that's open, you know, it could complicate things. So I think maybe we should talk about it on a case-by-case basis, but that's just my first thoughts, and I can research it further for us.
So you may want to put a qualifier in there is in general, if you do refer it to a prosecutor or IA or whatever, you should pause your proceedings until you get a response. That would be what I would suggest then if you're concerned about it. It's the simplest way to do it. It just says pause. It doesn't mean you have to stop, but it should give you a like, what does a pause mean, right? It means that we don't have to meet our timelines anymore, any of the things we commit ourselves to on that case. If we take this step and we decide we want to consult with a prosecutor or an attorney or believe it's a criminal matter, you should give yourself the ability to pause your other duties on this case until you have good legal consult on what your next step is. So that it may warrant a sentence in there, just mandating a pause in moving it forward if it does meet any of your criteria to refer. Suggestion.
And Martin, if in your research, could you also research how that affects the statute of limitations? I'm assuming it freezes this administrative process in that relationship to, I'm assuming it's kind of like an IA process, with the arbitration process and everything like that. So we want to make sure that a technicality, like meeting a technicality here or not meeting it, does not prevent us from enacting our full administrative authority.
We don't have a time. That's one of the things we discovered. We are not mentioned in the collective bargaining agreements. We don't exist in their labor law, right? And according to this procedure, your appeals from us is to common police court, not to arbitration or anything like that, right? So our stance right now, and Martin, I think we're on the same page, is we don't have a statute of limitations on hearing a case. We are not bound by their CBAs because we haven't been negotiated into them in any way. And so right now, that's what our stance is and what we've come up with. So Martin, you want to?
Yeah, through the chair, qualifying statement on that is just, we haven't found out how we are involved in the CBAs to this point. There are a lot of procedural questions on where does this fit in the process, in the pipeline. This manual was built intentionally with all of that removed because we don't know. I don't know how this is going to turn out when it goes to court, and I'm sure it will go to court.
Mm-hmm.
So why not just figure it out then?
Our community member friend Kayla, I think, heard us struggling with the language and did send some language that I actually really like. It's okay for me to read it for you guys. While officer administrative discipline is under the scope of the CPC, the criminal elements of the case are outside the scope of the CPC. I kind of like that because I think it.
Say it again.
While officer administrative discipline is under the scope of the CPC, the criminal elements of the case are outside of the scope of the CPC.
Where's that? Like in front of here? Instead of the first sentence?
It's basically saying that, maybe that's just, to me, it makes it more clear, while administrative discipline is within the scope of the CPC, any criminal.
I think.
That's not what the rest of the sentence says. It's that we can, if any citizen can scan for criminal elements, we have the right to scan. So I think
No, but it's saying that it's the same thing as what it says here, that it's the scope of review is limited to non-criminal matters. So,
Also, I think there's another problem that if it does qualify as a criminal issue, that could ratchet up the discipline, right? So it's not like you don't consider the criminal elements, it's just that you can't enforce the punishment.
you can't
beyond-
investigate or enforce,
Yeah.
but you can scan anything you
Say
receive
termination,
for
right?
criminality. So you have the right, any citizen, Ryan can take the ORC and take a bit of evidence that someone gives him and look at it and determine as an educated person that he believes that it meets elements of crimes based on what is given to him, right? So you don't want to give yourself the non-ability to at least scan to make sure.
yeah, I think, but what if it says, well, the CPC may consider criminal elements. Let me finish. While the CPC may consider criminal elements of the case, in order to determine this, to make decisions around administrative discipline.
Turn off your mics if you're not set up like.
Then you could say the CPC scope review is limited to non-criminal matters.
I don't think that's necessary.
Hmm?
I don't think it's necessary.
You don't think it's necessary? Okay. I mean, do you have a problem with it? That's a little
I
different
kinda
than.
do, I would just rather it not be there at all.
Yeah, is there any problem with just taking all that out?
Taking what out?
The
To the point, even the
Two lights out,
even the, second,
I want to turn the volume down.
even the, I think it was scope of review is limited to non-criminal. I mean, that seems to be the issue here that's gotten us to, so if you just take that out, so I think that a better first sentence would be, if it's discovered that there could be criminal elements to a case this is from, what is this from, an externally discovered, or?
No, it's under the scope of the CPC
So
review.
if at any point, a potential crime has been potentially committed, the CPC will do this, instead of saying, like, qualitative, we send it to IA, like, just do the steps. That already explains what, right? And then, obviously, do you think it's obvious that we have, because if you committed a crime or a felony, and we consider it, it could qualify for a group 4 violation, right?
Well, I don't think you're gonna see many felonies not go investigated up to this point, right? But again, you will see the most common missed crimes that aren't investigated or are applied disparately in the division are assaults related to excessive use of force, right? Dereliction of duty and violation of civil rights. So I think those 3 are gonna be things that you need to learn and be equipped with dealing, because sometimes they charge officers with them and sometimes they don't even investigate them. So I think that's the point of this here. So the process would be, first ask IA, right? So I think what we're trying to do is, so the process is, we think that this should have been thought of at least. We ask IA, did you think of this or investigate? If the answer is no, the next step, kind of like those charts, is, right, do we think we have enough evidence to send it to a prosecutor, consult with a prosecutor, right? So it's, the first question is, did you investigate? If the answer is no, then what you want to write in here is your ability to take action after that and not just ignore that they ignored it,
So Martin, if I could make a suggestion, could we rewrite this paragraph as, from the perspective not of what we are capable of doing, but the steps that we would take, to make it a bit more concrete?
Yeah.
And that would also explain to the reader, right, that there is a process. And obviously, if IA kicks it back, we can then decide another step. So that might be more clear than the domains, explaining the domains, because they're very overlapping.
Okay, do you think that there should be a statement at all about how we do not have the power to do something like that? That was the main intent of the first statement.
We can, but in
I thought it was
explaining,
clear.
but then it goes into these, we don't have the power to enforce a criminal kind of punishment.
Okay, spell out the power a little bit, spell out the limitation of power more clearly, and then dive directly into the steps that we can take for something, is what I'm hearing.
But yeah, I think my concern is that we will potentially be reviewing cases where there are criminal elements. Even if we are not enforcing criminal law, we're not charging people, we're not, we can't find people guilty of criminal charges, but.
and 90% or more will have already been adjudicated by a court, because most of the time that you'll see in the divisional notices, if it's a serious element, or even if it's a driving under the influence, those are common ones, right? The disposition of the criminal court will be considered at the hearing, right? So more likely than not, you won't have to deal with this paragraph at all, right? But as I mentioned, there are some crimes that in my view have blindness by the Division of Police in IA, and that is the violation of civil rights, the dereliction of duty, and assault, right? And those are all usually misdemeanors, and for some reason, IA just doesn't often scan it for that. OPS doesn't. That's another thing that coincidentally we should push. This is a sidebar, but we need to push OPS to start doing this as well, looking for criminal elements that they don't look for every day, because it's running through it's escaping their mind that if they, in their investigation, they see criminal elements, they should be following the same process, right? And for those 3 crimes, for some reason, they don't often do that. They either make an assumption I already looked at it, which is often wrong, so.
So it seems,
But most will be adjudicated.
so it seems like we have some clarity, Jason.
Yeah.
I mean, Martin, you can work on this and come back. So you want to keep going?
Sure. Okay, my next one is under the appeal pursuant, the things that the officer can request. So one of the things that says, like, all of the other items are things that I think could be, would be done within, like, someone could show up to the hearing and say, I want this. But the last one, the commission subpoena power to require and present evidence, that would not, you couldn't just show up and request that, because it says under here that, that says that can be requested by the officer before or during the hearing. And so I just was wondering if we, like, if number 6, if an officer were to come in and say, in the middle of the hearing, I want to use the commission subpoena power to acquire this piece of evidence, and we're already in the middle of the hearing. But it's saying that they have the right to ask for this in the middle of the hearing, would then the hearing stop? And then the commission would have to get it and then resume it. So the rest of the things, an officer could show up and make that request day of, and it would be fine. So I don't know, we could put something in there that says must be requested X amount of days prior to the hearing, or.
Well, if circumstances change or some, something becomes of knowledge that they may need, I mean, they have the right to try to defend themselves. I feel like no matter what stage of the process is in.
Well, no, but when I'm asking, so imagine we're in the middle of a hearing and the officer says, I want to use the power to request this piece of evidence. What do we do?
Give them-
Well, I think we have earlier in the manual, we have a limitation on how this commission admits evidence. So, and that evidence is only being brought in if you're including it in your brief.
Right.
So you had a deadline for your brief. If you needed this before, you could have asked us for a subpoena now to do this. And, I think that is really what's limiting that. I'm a little, so that's just all I have to say on that.
Maybe it's not an issue, it's just.
I think, I do want to tread carefully on putting extra limitations, explicit limitations on these specific items. Just because yes, for the appeal, now they would have a stronger argument to say, you know what, I actually didn't get the due process I was entitled to under the CPC's hearing. So I think that we may be able to, my response in that moment would probably be, this just is not, it wouldn't be admissible anyway, right? You didn't bring this evidence in your brief. You didn't ask for a subpoena before. Per our rules, this is not admissible evidence.
So, but then at that point, is our rule contradicting itself?
How?
Because it says that as per the appeal, these things can be requested before, specifically the officer may request, and it says that they may be requested during or before or during the hearing. And then it lists the commission subpoena power to acquire and present evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So if here we're saying that this can be requested during the hearing, and then later in the rule, we're saying, if you want evidence, this is the process through which you need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that in contradiction?
Yeah, probably a little bit. I mean,
We could put something
yeah,
here that just parentheses for procedures around
yeah,
requesting evidence, see section blah blah of the rule, so that it's clear that you still have to follow this other procedure
right.
for evidence.
Yeah. Okay. I think
And at the end of the day, I mean, we don't need to limit it. I think I was just trying to how do we make it match?
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, I'm open to it.
Okay. So yeah.
It's not an extra limitation. It's just more explicitly guiding the person for the process.
Right. Yeah. Okay, and then Sergeant Jackson suggested that we add without undue haste after the says that the co-chair of the commission must make every effort to accommodate the request made by the officer before or during the hearing, without undue haste, is a way of trying to prevent officers or people from being able to use that as a way to. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
under delay. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry, where did you say you put that?
After. Yeah, right after there, without undue delay. Okay. The other thing is, so right now we're using very similar terms, case file and case package. And I was going to suggest that we change the case file to preliminary case file so that it's clear this is that kind of initial review. Because like going through this myself, I kept being like, which one is this one again? Because there are two and they both have kind of different. So that was my suggestion.
Okay, through the chair, just a quick comment on that. The distinction is that the case file is literally the documents that are received by the commission from the previous administrative agency. So CPRB or the public safety. Then these items compiled with the case summary, the case comparisons, the recommendations, a jurisdiction statement, and any other documents are included. That is the case package. So all those things plus the case file is the case package.
Okay.
So that was my distinction, but the terms are very similar. So I was confused as well.
I think, but
I
then it says under 2.6.4, it says preparing the case file for the accountability committee. So maybe we change that to.
Yeah, okay.
Case report, and then what is what is sent to the full commission during, like, prior to the hearing? What's the name for that?
It's the case package plus the.
Case package.
Yeah, so they get the case package and they'll also get the brief, the opposing party's brief.
So so they're both called the case package. Do they change it all?
So the case package, through the chair, the case package does change. So when it comes to the accountability committee, it will be entirely comprised by the recommendations of the executive director and his or her staff. Then accountability has the ability to modify that case package, whether it be the recommendations, the case summary, the comparable cases, the additional evidence, and then that modified version is what gets sent out to, and final version is what gets sent out to the full commission.
Prior to the full hearing.
Prior to the full hearing.
But what is the name for the review? Because the executive director gets the, if they request, they get the case files, and then he put together that preliminary review that goes to the accountability committee for them to discuss whether they should even hear the case for an evidentiary hearing. What is that called?
The case package.
That's also called the case package.
So does he have the file?
He has the files.
Yeah, so that's the case package.
Case package. And then at that point, that case package is that they make a decision about whether they want whether they think that it should be either dismissed by the full commission or approved by the full commission.
Correct.
At that point, is that sent to the full commission?
Yes, but it's then modified by the accountability committee.
Okay, so then they receive a case package. Then the commission, so we're calling that a case package. And then once the commission says, yep, we're going to hear this case, prior to the evidentiary hearing, what do we call that file that the commission receives?
It's the case package plus the briefs.
Okay, so does that case package change?
I guess the full commission can, well, not really. I don't think so.
So it's like the thing that gets added, there's not a second review. The only thing that gets added to that case package is just the motions,
The briefs.
the brief, sorry.
Yes,
Okay.
yep. I think maybe what we could consider is, creating specific terms for the case package before it's modified by accountability. So there is the case package as presented by the executive director, or like the executive director's case package, and then it transforms into the accountability committee's case package.
Yeah, I
For
think that would be
specific terms to
helpful. Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be helpful just to make sure that it's understood what we're receiving. Okay.
And we will still work on how we transmit that stuff, right? So through trial and error.
Yeah.
You know, it may mean if we start doing a lot of cases a year, we may need, similar to what courts use, kind of a case management software, right? To be able to
Right.
put the evidence in. I think CPRB uses that. So trial and error and a lot of good feedback will help guide us on what system we use to deliver this stuff in a timely manner. Because I don't think we want to do it through SharePoint, even if we have to in the beginning. I don't think that's the ideal system to do that. So later on, we'll have to consider as when we look at the size of these files, how many things, how it gets transmitted, right? If we need something specifically for that purpose to manage these case files in an efficient way.
So then my next thing, do you still want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, the next thing was that it said that the committee shall, so then once the committee then reviews, the commission approves that we're gonna see, have the case, that we're gonna review, have it, evidentiary hearing. And then the executive director must send the case package to the accountability committee within 15 working days after receiving the complete case file. Oh no, this is for prior to that. So then they review pre-hearing procedures. Sorry, I'm getting myself confused. Okay, so then so I guess one thing that I was wondering is if we want to set a date, and maybe this is just kind of common sense, but it just says that the committee shall call a special meeting or add it to the agenda of a committee meeting within 14 calendar days of receiving the case package. Did we want to say that there's a certain number of days you want the committee to review it? Because I was just thinking about this through the eyes of an appeal. And I'm imagining someone saying, well, the committee only had the case file for 2 days before they made this decision. So how seriously could they have reviewed this? And maybe that's not an issue, but it just says that no, it has to be within 14 days. Do you want there to be a certain amount of days that the accountability committee needs to have it?
Through the chair, my response to that is I'm way more concerned about the full commission having enough time to vet everything. 100%.
Yeah.
That's what 115.5 wants. It wants all 13 commissioners to make sure they have fully read everything, understood everything, they're asking the questions, or making decisions. But I'm open to more time if they need it.
Okay.
And that time is an important thing. So, Martin and I have had this discussion and it hasn't gone beyond us yet, but if you're on accountability committee, right now our rules say you have to serve on 2 committees, to pull your weight. I think as we grow, if you're on accountability committee, it's going to be almost a full-time job. If you talk to CPRB, one of their biggest problems is exactly what you're talking about, right? They're constantly receiving cases. They have to spend so much time working on it, right? So I think, as we grow as an organization, we seriously need to consider, if you're on accountability committee, it should probably be your sole devoted thing that you spend most of your time as a commissioner on, and give you a pass to not have to serve in other capacities, because reviewing these files, following these files, prepping these files in conjunction with staff or hearings is going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of work. And if we have 300, roughly, what is it, 200 plus disciplines a year, Ryan? Even if we had, 15 or 20% of those coming to us for review, that's a heck of a workload. So, and not only that, it's also adding in the factor that accountability committee should be looking at all discipline and screening it itself for potential cases, right? So you would want to consider that as well. I think accountability committee, as we pass this, you need to have a discussion coinciding with this passage about, you know, the workload you're putting on accountability committee and what that means as if you serve on that committee, you know, what are you given, so that you have the ability to do your job correctly, so.
On that note, so at the end, when it says the amount of days that the commission has to have the full, like the motions in the case report, it says that the documents must be sent to the co-chairs no less than 5 days, no less than 5 days prior. But then we also say that the co-chairs have to send it to the commissioners no less than 5 days. So I wanted to suggest that we change that the motions have to be sent to the co-chairs no less than 6 days, so that then there's at the very least there's 1 day between when the deadline is for the things to be sent to the co-chairs and when things need to be sent to the commissioners.
I have to go, and I apologize, but I think we're probably parsing things. We need to think about the fact that probably the information flow should be given to all commissioners at the same time. I understand. I mean, it doesn't seem to be, because you're creating a hierarchy and a funnel that's not necessary. Also, commissioners, if 6 days could be a lot to look through a big case, I don't know what is the problem. So I would advocate, you know, I know that there's a concern that we should all, you know, there's a recusal process. If one of the commissioners that gets access to this speaks on it, then they can be recused. So I would advocate for probably once actually the executive director has something that all the commissioners get access to it, we're gonna have to really hammer it in that there's no assessments to be made, nothing, you know, and honestly, probably a lot of commissioners will not look at it until, you know, it is up for a vote. But I think that's probably a better strategy in we want the commissioners to be prepared for the hearing process to be, and I think 6 days is not, I mean, with the case that we just looked at, Ms. Johnson's, I mean, it took me at least, I don't know, I listened to it once very quickly, I listened to it again, so I probably spent like 6 hours looking at a very small case.
Can I clarify what you're asking?
Right.
Or what you're saying? So you're saying that right now, because the co-chairs are the ones who receive the motions with
Briefs.
sorry, thank you, I don't know why I keep saying motions, receive the briefs with the case report, you're saying that instead of them, everything being sent to the co-chairs and then sent to the full commission, you're saying you think that they should just be sent to the full commission?
Not the briefs. I mean, the briefs, regardless of, you know, that could bias, right? The evidence, I think, should be given there should be like a free thought before. I would advocate looking at the evidence before reading any briefs, before reading any assessments. Because that would lead a person towards a particular conclusion, and it doesn't. So I would maybe withhold those assessments. Otherwise, the commissioner could also take a shortcut and just say, oh, well, there's good reasoning for this. And that is not what the community has asked for, is that all 13 of us might be able to see something that one of the other 12 have missed.
So you're saying that there should be no briefs, they should just receive the package of all the evidence?
At the beginning, they should be able to, I think, look at the
primary sources. You're saying in addition to receiving the case report, you think that commissioners should receive a file with all the primary sources that the executive director used to make the case report?
I mean, I can't determine, you know, how a commissioner looks at information, but
I'm asking if that's what you're saying.
I'm explaining, thank you, but I'm explaining that that's how I would look at a case, is I did not look at Mr. Goodrich's assessment, although it was very well written. I looked at the evidence first. I had to come to my own. I even looked at the primary evidence. I didn't even look at the OPS report first. I listened to the recordings. I looked at the primary evidence, no assessment. And maybe we can have a little bit of training as to how you go through that process objectively, because there's biases everywhere. And maybe we can, you know, if a case, we'll have to work it out, you know, because I can't, we can only make a suggestion to commissioners on how to assess the information, but, maybe some training would be good. That's how I would do it from a kind of a science perspective, is that the evidence should be looked at first, and anything interpretive should be looked at second, and then Mr. Goodrich's third interpretation, could be looked at last. But I generally think that, as a general principle, whatever is given to the executive director or a set of commissioners, I'm not comfortable, it should be given to all commissioners. So we have the problem. The only problem I see with that is that then people still start making their assessments, right? So we have to find a way out of it. There is a refusal process. People get excited over the evidence. They want to talk, so we're just going to have to discipline ourselves from not doing that. And I think that, if I spent 6 hours on a very narrow case, I don't think 6 days, given that most of the commissioners have full-time jobs, is enough time.
So can I just clarify again? So this particular piece says, like, I know you're advocating for a different process altogether. It sounds like that for this, it's saying that the co-chairs will receive these materials and then send it to the commissioners. Are you saying that in the way that this is written right now, you are saying that you would like, instead of for it to be sent to the co-chairs to be sent to the commissioners, you want it to just be sent to all commissioners?
Well, this is only with the briefs, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
why, that's why I said, what the change I proposed was changing that to 6 days, so that the co-chairs have a day to send it to the commissioners.
I don't understand why Mr. Goodrich can't send them out, why the co-chairs, they're not on the accountability committee. If you're creating another, like it forwarded, it seems like, but I'm advocating generally for a deeper assessment of this. We can fix that, maybe put a Band-Aid on it, but I think we're not dealing with the because the goal is to make sure that people have time to look over all of the information, and that the commissioners are not biased in any way by the process, because there could be a dissenting view about disagreeing with because we are supposed to make the decision. So this is very important. I know that we can, other things, we have other eyes on it, but this information is also very important because we have it. The community doesn't even have it, so we don't have another set of eyes on it. So I have to go, but.
Crystal, hold on one sec. I have a question for you, because you've talked about wanting to discuss accountability. So when do you
We're gonna have
expect
a
to
next,
convene that?
Tuesday we'll have a meeting, so everybody's welcome. And then I will think through, the reason I've not also said very much is that I think that there are things globally to improve on this, and I hope to have that, and I'll send out some comments and everything for the entire commissioners to look at. But I need to think, because I need to understand also the entire process too. So this is, it's about like looking at what we have to be fair, consistent, and we have to manage the workload, manage the flow of information. Those are all the things that we need to consider. So looking at it from that perspective, but I will have, some comments about it.
Before you go, I just wanna say, 2 things. One, I agree with you 100% that time is a major factor in this, right? And that's why I originally said we need to be careful about time commitments, because we're untested and they may look good on paper, but realistically, we're putting really hard timeframes on us, which requires a credible amount of grind when people have day jobs. So we need to keep that in mind. The other thing is, I think you're right. There is a discussion worth having of when do we share what with who, right? At the end of the day, these are public records, right? And we most likely won't have unredacted things. So the idea of restricting public records past a certain point is to protect that bias, right? But if anyone were to ask for it, if a commissioner were to say, I demand to see this, I don't think we have the actual right to stop them from seeing it, right? Because it's a public open record. So I think your point is very valid there, that we need to consider how we share this, because what we write down, we need to agree to, right? Because of that reason, right? So someone can break it and know that they may have the right to break that. So we need to really deliberate, what does it mean for us if someone breaks that, right? So when do people get information and access to information, and why? And if we do restrict it at certain points, it should be based on that bias concern, right? We're doing it to preserve this case, and that is the reason internally we have to respect these. And thank you for the compliment about the brief.
Thank you. So I'll next Tuesday, right? Next Tuesday.
Accountability is Tuesday.
At 6, and this will probably, if we have something else, I'll put on the agenda, but this will be the primary thing. So I'll send out my comments before then. Thank you.
Well, the meeting ends now.
This meeting ends.
Yeah, it would have been,
We
it
don't
would,
have
no,
quorum.
we can't.
You can
It would have been
discuss.
nice to
We
have
can
the
discuss,
notice.
but.
Yeah.
We can discuss, but we're not gonna vote on anything.
We're not
You're
voting.
not voting on anything.
We can't make changes to it.
No, you could, but you can talk about what changes you would make.
Just two of us, so.
And us. And we missed public comment.
But it's not, it's not a formal meeting, it's not,
Would this be one of those moments where I could fill in?
no.
No, it's only when someone vacates the
We're not,
seat,
but
it's
you're,
just
that's
an
what just
absence.
meeting publicly, you're not voting, it's fine.
Right.
So
But it's not a
maybe-
formal meeting.
Maybe transition to an informal meeting.
Right.
I have to go back to it.
More like a work group or
Sunset.
something.
Thank you.
See ya. Good night.
What makes this an informal meeting?
Well, there's not a quorum.
Well, I know,
don't
but I'm
what it
just
is.
saying that, like, what makes.
Forgot about
it-
Charles, if Charles wasn't there, there was a
Quorum.
I know, but I'm saying what made what we were doing.
It's a-
It was a formal meeting with a quorum.
Right, but I know, I'm saying that if we keep going the same way that we were
Yeah,
going,
I know, but
then we're
Right.
we're saying that was an informal meeting. When it was not.
it doesn't matter. I mean,
Martin can
You
tell
can
you
keep
if
talking,
it's kosher to go forward or not, you know.
right,
Let's keep going. We gave the public notice that we're gonna be
Yeah, we're
discussing
talking-
this stuff today. I would, we cannot vote, but we can still discuss.
I mean, in theory, we could have voted before Terry left.
Okay, so,
We weren't going to, but that was certainly within the meeting framework. So now we're not gonna vote, and we're just gonna talk.
okay.
So if you wanna keep going through your stuff.
Yeah, I guess so. So yeah, I just said the thing about the 6 days so that, because later in the policy it says that the commissioners must receive it no later than 5 days. Okay. The other thing that I noticed, conflict with our other rules is it says that the accountability committee chair must coordinate the calendars of the full commission to pick a desirable date. Technically in our rules, it says that the only person who can call a special meeting, unless we're just saying that the accountability committee chair just tries to figure out what the date should be, and then the co-chair schedule a date of a special, because I'm assuming this is a special meeting.
Yes, it's a special meeting.
So then only the co-chairs could, so,
Okay.
yeah. So I mean, we could either say that the co-chairs have to coordinate it, or we just say that they have to send the dates to the co-chairs to schedule it. Or we could change the other rule and say, except for evidentiary hearings, which the accountability chair can schedule.
And I think in our rule, it says a hearing is its own class of special meeting.
Okay.
So I think that you're
It's fine.
defining that now. I'm pretty certain, I don't have it in front of me, but I think that there's special meetings, right? And then there's hearings, even though they would be classified under Ohio law as a special meeting. They have their own particular rules that you follow because it's an actual disciplinary hearing. So I'll have to double check that in the book, but I think that we made that distinguishment in the rules.
And I'm by no means, through the chair, am I saying that what I wrote in terms of who does what is what is the best way to do it. It's literally just the thing that flew out of my brain on the paper.
A way to do it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm open to modifying anything.
The other thing that is kind of a more big picture question, and this is also something I want to shout out, community member, Ms. Pincus, is about the statute of limitations statute of limitations isn't the right word, but the union lays out really specific, and the union contract lays out very specific timeframes in which discipline can be given. And one of the elements of the case that was talked about in the first case that the accountability committee reviewed was timing, and I know that's one of the elements that goes into the case report. And so, one thing that I wanted that I don't feel like I totally understand yet is, how far back can we actually change discipline?
You can do anything you can dream of at this point because it's undefined under the statute. Now, will a judge agree? No. Or yes, we don't know. So, the only way that question is going to be determined is in a court of law. So if you feel like a case comes before you and it's 10 years old and it's egregious enough that you feel it should be reopened, nothing that we found legally prevents you from doing so right now, but we haven't taken a super deep dive into it, right? Not to the level where we would be arguing to a judge, certainly. But as I said before, The commission is not mentioned in the Fraternal Order of Police or the CPPA collective bargaining agreement. The only disciplinary entities mentioned in those agreements are the chief of police and the director of public safety. So you're, right now, you're outside those contracts. And you were not in the, the city's a negotiating party. They did not negotiate you into those contracts for their own reasons. I can't speak for city law, but, so be it.
Yeah, and through the chair who is not here. This is an informal meeting now. I don't have to say fancy things
No, you
like
don't have
that.
to say fancy
We can
things.
just talk like humans. Great.
This is a fake meeting.
Great. I would just say, if you want to push your own limitations on it in order to make things easier for yourself, you can do that, right? Is it relevant to this commission if somebody needs to see their discipline increased 15 years ago? Is it relevant? It's a question you guys have to answer. So, does it make sense? Because you are then spending staff time, committee time, work to do that. So, I don't know. It's a question that we have to answer.
I think that too, that question becomes really relevant. And this came up in feedback from community members of, what's this workload look like? Because if we're looking at any potential disciplinary decision from any time in CDP's history, obviously the officer would have to still work there, but that just the preparing these briefs alone.
Let's be realistic about it, right? So you also have to, if you see something egregious, you can always say, we're gonna talk about it, say it's egregious and leave it at that, right? Because to your point, you have to maintain some grounding on the planet Earth, right? And the chances of you legally prevailing in a case, if you discipline an officer from something that happened 10 years ago, are probably very slim. But the benefit you have is you're not tied to those extremely restrictive collective bargaining agreements, which means that, let's talk realistically. If you're 6 months out of that, come on, now you can really consider that and say, or even in another scenario, if the chief or the safety director said, we would have imposed discipline, and this happens frequently, right? However, the CBA does not allow us to at this point, right? That is an open-ended thing to move it to your court because they were powerless under the collective bargaining agreement. However, it may not apply to you, right? So those are the things you should look for, is those little nuggets out there that give you reason to believe that this case could be right for you. And that's one of them, because we see that in letters where they say the discipline would have been this. However, the CBB, the collective bargaining agreement does not allow for it. So therefore they will only get a letter. That's it.
I think one thing, so there's a community member who, went through the process of filing an OPS complaint. When I looked at the OPS complaint form on the form that they fill out and the website, it said nothing about any time restrictions. And this person went through this process and essentially was told this is too old, and I guess part from a community member's perspective, if I'm going on the website, and this is kind of separate from this, it might be about the public facing information. And, I had something that happened to me 10, 15 years ago. And we know that as a commission, we're probably not going to end up hearing that case. Isn't that something we should probably communicate to the public so that people don't come to us thinking my case can be heard?
And to Martin's point, you could put a number on it, right? You could say, or you could put levels on it with likelihoods, however you decide to do it. One thing I will say that courts are, and Martin can elaborate on this because he's an attorney, I'm not, but I also understand courts enough to say this. They look at what was in place at the time, right? So this is very true for us too. If you're looking to discipline an officer that for a charge that's even before the consent decree, right? You're looking into a whole nother window because you have to take into account the discipline process at that time and what would be equal and appropriate in that time period, right? you can't, usually courts don't apply backward standards, right? So you can't apply 2024 disciplinary standards to something that happened in 2012. It probably wouldn't hold up very well in court. But it doesn't mean you can't take a community member through that process of healing by at least having a discussion and acknowledging that that happened to them, and that you know, and so there's a line there somewhere, right? We just went through that with our first case where some of that stuff was for her going on decades, right? And I think to some degree, just letting her come to you and talk about it and say, this happened to me, was had some benefits, right? But there's a line there somewhere. So you have to think about that. And you could let people know in a reasonable way that what I just said, that the likelihood that we could go that far back and provide justice for you is low.
Do you have more?
I do.
All right, I've got a couple things, but you
Do you
just
want,
keep going.
okay, great. Some also feedback that came from both Ms. Pincus and Sergeant Jackson was about the preparation.
My name's Richard.
Sorry, it's a term of respect. You want, okay, I'm sorry, Richard and Kayla. Richard and Kayla both kind of brought up questions about and I also heard some questions about, you know, that it always being the executive director who prepares all these briefs, and not any knock to our executive director, but having all the information flow from one person. I think it's similar to some of the questions that Commissioner Wong brought up is, you know, if all the evidence is going through that one person's eyes, then obviously you can still review the evidence. Or even just the work volume, is this too much to do on top of all the other work of the executive director? So should there be an additional person that's working with the executive director? It's just a question.
Can I speak to my own comment on that? Because we're in an informal situation here. Is that okay?
It is an informal meeting.
That's up to.
Yeah, that's fine.
Could I?
Yeah.
Should I?
Any community members want to come to the table? It's an informal meeting.
I'm just gonna read the thing that I wrote to you.
Mr. C, you're welcome to the table.
Okay, so,
You do have to keep in.
And I will just make a point, Mark,
Fifteen
didn't we
minutes.
say that, or designees, and we also said, you know, legal counsel, so before you move forward, we'll just say, we're a small shop, right? We're not getting help, we're just not, sorry.
Yes.
City council has said no new positions for you as long as I breathe air,
yeah,
so,
I'm gonna make my.
so let's just,
Keep it quick.
so just, we'll just make it clear that it's not, I just want to set the stage. It's not unusual for staff to prep for boards that are not full-time. It just isn't. OPS does it, everyone does it across the United States. So I just want that to be clear. We don't have a staff position for this. Could this build to an argument for more staff? Sure, absolutely. So that's where that sits.
Right. And also, we in 2 minutes is public comment period. So this is brief. I wrote it, so I'm just going to read it. My major suggestion would be to have all the duties pertaining to the ED be changed to a position called accountability advisor or something like that, which would be a newly hired staff position. This position could also be utilized by the hiring of an assistant director with enough background in legal research, or even better, a lawyer or a paralegal with a background in criminal law. As written, I believe this drastically changes the job duties of the ED, who will have too much work to do. And I think it would be more effective to have an ED overseeing the accountability advisor, so still overseeing the position, obviously, just as they would any other staffer. I like the idea of this being a little bit more of a team effort rather than just being one person, because that feels like a lot of work and a lot of influence for just one person to have. Lastly, this is an integral position, so until the position is created or filled, and if ever the position becomes temporarily vacant, I believe the consultant should be immediately hired to fill the gap. So that was the one general point. And which I understand that we've been told things by counsel. I also watched that, but that doesn't mean that we can't ask. And then the other thing is what will happen the day after this motion is passed by the full commission. In order to make sure all our ducks are in a row, would it be helpful to provide an effective buy date instead of just being off the races immediately? How would we manage an influx of cases, which speaks to what we were just talking about? How do we ensure the ED is not overwhelmed by this task at the cost of all other duties?
So there is one reference to designee in there, so maybe part of it is just putting that in different
It's like
places.
all delegation. So
Putting it
to
in
your
different
point about the
places, so
assistant director, it would be a key part of that role as well. And to your point, you could write the qualifications of that job
So,
for that.
so we-
All been considered in that realm.
so we can
100% agree.
add more language around in different key places.
So
of
what you
the designee.
can't, what you don't wanna do is write a rule that's dependent on a position that
Right,
doesn't
no.
exist or may
We're
not
just-
exist. You have to write
We're just gonna-
with what you have right now.
We're just gonna talk about the designee right now, and we're just gonna add more language where it's appropriate to that, if that makes sense, so.
I have a few more things. Do you wanna go into your thing?
I would love to do at least one thing, which may not take too much time, but, because I mentioned it, I've emailed to both of you, but I got input, around that Garrity issue, so I know it seems like that's just more, we could put some language in there that would make that clear, right, so, do you want to just quickly?
Yeah, so I think the Garrity issue comment is, number one, officers don't have to come to this, right? This is,
They're not being compelled.
they're not being compelled. And like we said before, if there's a simultaneous criminal thing that's going on, by the time it gets to us, you would think it'd almost be over with. And I think really what we could do to cover ourselves is just include a sentence about that in the notice that we sent to the officer. So some sort of disclaimer notice saying you're not going to be compelled to making self-incriminating statements, period. That, I think it's pretty easy, but yeah, I think it's worth including, so thanks for the comment, for sure.
Few more?
My other question came up when we talked about quorum, because right now quorum for full commission meeting is 9 of 13, so and you're suggesting we might need to increase that? So I just have a
7.
question. No, it's
7.
9.
It's 9?
Quorum is 9.
I thought it was 7.
No, it's
No,
9.
9.
Oh, why did I think 7?
This is normal
Look at
majority,
7,
but
that's
it's majority votes,
okay.
but quorum is 9.
Quorum, okay, gotcha, sorry.
So I'm just wondering what the thought is around that, like, what, do we really want to have more than 9, or what do we think?
It was just something that was brought up in a preliminary conversation that Jason and I had about this being one of arguably the most important duties of the commission.
Right.
And if you're seeing significant gaps in presence for these hearings, what does that signify to the public?
And the
But
commission should have 30 days, within 30 days.
I am making no statement as to
Whether it should be.
whether to do
Okay.
it.
We also have to
Wait,
consider
wait,
the
wait.
recusal issue, so you may
Right.
not ever be able, you may have 4 commissioners recused from a case, and then you have a unique problem there, so you have to base your math on recusals, but you don't know how many recusals you could have on any given case, so you have to be careful there that you don't prevent yourself from doing business if too many commissioners have a recusal.
How would you suggest we figure that out? Any thoughts about how to go about deciding that, or?
We could certainly bring you some suggestions, like Martin and I can brainstorm on it, right? Because you don't know that stuff
Right.
unknown, so any math with an unknown is a challenge because you don't, what that variable will be.
Right.
There
There could be language around the percentage or a fraction that's
Yeah.
given
It could be
recusal
it
with.
could be separate rules. It could say,
including it,
if no recusals,
Right.
we do this.
Right.
If there are recusals, it's based on this new formula.
3/4 or whatever.
Yeah.
supermajority.
So it may have to be a 2-tier rule depending on if there are recusals or
Right.
not recusals.
So yeah, just, I think it's something to
Yeah.
figure out.
And our recusals counted as a quorum number, right? So if you're, can we write a rule that says, if there's a recusal, then the math just goes downwards to figuring quorum? I don't know, So, but we can come up with a couple of different menu items for you to choose from on that if you want.
Okay. All right.
Because it's a good question, but I think it's unique because of the recusal.
Right.
It's not so simple.
Okay. No, that was my, do you have more?
Yeah, a couple things. So, closing comments, under the evidentiary hearings, I thought it might make sense to have time limits for closing comments by officer and closing comments by CPC executive director. Just like 15 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever that might be.
I don't think, did I not include that in the rules for the evidentiary hearing? Hold on.
There is something for.
Oh, there is.
Every commissioner, I think it's commissioner.
Yeah, it was
I didn't-
commissioners. It talked about commissioners being limited to
Yeah.
talking twice for 10 minutes.
Okay, good call.
The other, and then you and I talked about this on the phone, but just a, what's it called? The layout thing, saying one, that DPS was, the discipline was inconsistent with similar cases, and then two, commissioners should evaluate, because that's the two standards. And then, I think that those four areas that are identified, lack of cultural competence, racial bias and profiling, excessive use of force, and lack of accountability and transparency. I had some concerns about things like, bias around the LGBT community, treatment of people with disabilities aren't technically don't fall under any of these. And so I wanted to suggest that we include some language of all the federally protected classes. So pregnancy, gender, sexuality, disability, nationality,
Religion, age.
yeah. So that we list those under here, like we could either say bias or profiling. And I mean, I think racial bias should still be a standalone because it's, it's kind of one of the core elements that we see under police misconduct, but I just thought that we should include all the,
Protected classes.
yeah, good.
Is there some sort of, I mean, I don't want to turn it into a list. Is there a way that we can come up with some terms to,
Yeah. Well, they're actually,
The term is protected classes.
but are there things beyond the technical term for protected classes that you want to incorporate into your factors? Because there are things that have not been accepted as official protected classes.
Sure.
Well, even the federal level, state level, and county level are not exactly the same. Up to this moment, Cuyahoga County has a very good a group of the people being protected. So you may take those as a reference. Pick the one giving us the most to put it in our language.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. From this, it's from the. Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about.
maybe I can workshop this
Something
section
like-
with you and
Yeah.
help you write something.
Yeah.
Then we can send it to everybody for feedback. The other thing was, the other couple of things that I think need to be addressed is that if the commission finds the first finding, it must include the exact discipline it deems appropriate on that form. So I guess I was kind of trying to imagine a process in which all the commissioners are listening to this hearing. You make a finding, and then you're supposed to write down what you think the discipline decision should be. Like,
The brief will probably most likely come with like a menu to choose from, right? So here's the possible disciplinary outcomes. That's how I imagine it now. That way you're not just shooting from the hip and, making up a discipline. Like you'll say, especially if you're increasing, there's probably only so many levels you can go from where you are, right? So I think your brief will include, here are the possible.
right, but then if all commissioners vote for a different possible one, then
It
how
has to
is
be a
that?
majority vote.
You gotta
Okay.
keep working it until you hit a majority. So
Exactly.
in that scenario, you would revote and revote, and just like, when you, in an election when it's stuck, right? You would have to unlock that, or you would have to, I think it's in here, any commissioner can table the hearing, and then come back to the hearing. So if it gets exhausted, if you're going 3 hours, you can't make a determination, then you have that option too.
So that was my next question is, what if, so it says that a commissioner can make a motion to postpone the decision for another day. At least a majority of commissioners present must approve the decision. What if that does not pass?
Keep going.
The meeting just doesn't end? Okay. And then the other thing was, so there's the investigation of people. So if there's a conflict and the commissioner does not self-identify, but then so here's one clarification. So it says if a commissioner self-identifies a conflict, then it says further commissioners must refrain from discussing the case, including. I wanted to clarify that that's all commissioners, not just the people who have recused themselves. Okay, so I think we should just add all, just so it's clear that it's not only referencing those who have already recused themselves. And then also it says any person can bring alleged violation to the co-chair to the commission. The co-chair shall conduct an investigation to their satisfaction. I was wondering if that's like too broad. Like, what does that investigation look like? What are the standards for the investigation? Maybe it's not too broad, but
I wrote it intentionally broad.
Okay.
So that way people can't be like, well, you didn't do it exactly what I thought. You should have done this investigation. You're sort of trusting the co-chairs to do the investigation to their satisfaction. But if I am also not opposed to specifically writing out investigation requirements, but to me it just seemed a little bit,
Prescriptive.
yes.
What do you think?
And I would
the
also
co-chair?
say, I would also
I
say,
think we should put limits on the stuff that are.
Yeah.
I would be cautioned to don't write it with co-chairs in mind, write it with the idea that, people are gonna do the right thing. Remember, you elect your co-chairs, right? So you have to consider what the co-chairs are tasked with in the election process, right? So if this is one of their things that are charged with them, it has to be one of the things you consider asking yourself when you hear names of who wants to be co-chairs is, are they capable of doing something like this?
yeah, it wasn't a question of trust. It was just even for the co-chairs to have some guidance on what they're supposed to do. And then my very last thing was it said the co-chairs may be appealed by the commissioner to the remaining commission members. If appealed, the remaining commissioners may conduct their investigation to their satisfaction, and their decision to overrule the co-chairs may be only completed with a 2/3 vote. So I thought that the idea of all the commissioners conducting an investigation seemed kind of intense. I was going to suggest that if there's an appeal, that you establish an ad hoc committee.
Yeah, this is where things got a little gray and I got tired. Writing this manual, I was like, okay, I'm in some fantasy world where this is happening and these people are just trying to argue with each other, but they actually happen. So I have to kind of bring us back to reality. But I'm open and I like that ad hoc idea. Keeping it open to everybody to do it just it seems too much.
I'm imagining all the commissioners then put on their like a old detective hat in a.
And you're talking about again,
Hold on.
you're talking about again, if you go into this situation with recusal, you gotta consider the time that it could delay a hearing, right? So that's another thing. If you're doing an ad hoc and an investigation, and if someone has bias, I think you're running into to making it very
Probably not,
complex.
'cause
Well, right now it says that
Well, you can keep talking though.
I know what it says. So that's
all
where.
commissioners can.
And reading it, so I've read this draft, and reading it and then talking about it out loud, you get new realizations of, okay,
Yeah.
I think we're complicating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that could add a significant amount of time before we hear a case. So something like that could go on for months, an investigation into whether
So,
someone's
I would
biased.
like to just suggest that, I mean, we can keep talking, but I think we should adjourn soon. I want to know, like, with what you've got and your annotated version and some changes you can make based on this conversation, can that be then the document that accountability looks at? So we're not just starting over from scratch. I'd like, if that's possible, accountability. Because they're gonna be talking about these next week.
Next Tuesday,
There's
they're
no-
opening this up in her.
I would rather they have some record of our conversation.
Okay, so you want them to have record of your conversation?
Yeah.
Okay,
Otherwise, like
We're
starting from
starting over.
scratch.
okay.
So yes, I think that would make sense for them to start with the document, even if it's not a finalized document, but you have, I saw you making annotations, comments on the side,
Yeah,
so you could see that and you can clean it up maybe, is that
okay,
okay?
yeah.
To have you do that in the short
I'll
term?
clean it up.
Yeah.
And then I'll send it to them.
Yeah,
Are you working on commission stuff tomorrow?
Yeah,
Maybe I can call you in the morning and we can workshop the
sure, no problem.
protected clauses section.
Yeah, okay. Okay, sounds good. So what are you guys thinking for the next rules committee meeting?
Depends on how the calendar.
yeah, we'll have to see, I mean, we have other things to do too, so.
You have two dates before the full commission meeting, if you want to move this forward at a faster pace,
Mhm.
right? So ideally, if accountability has some additional changes and
Next
you want to
Tuesday.
discuss those changes, there are 2 days where there's nothing occurring in that week before. I know it's a lot, this month is almost every night
Mhm.
a meeting, right?
Right.
But right now, the work demands it, and we do have, the public saying,
Which
hearings
next?
need to happen soon, so, I just worry that if we, it's
So
those.
it's looking like we have the 15th
It's the
and
Monday and the
17th.
Tuesday before our full commission meeting are open, I
No,
think. at this
Sounds like
point.
the Monday is gonna be, I don't know, John was saying that might be the
And aren't those dates,
full
yeah,
special meeting.
yeah, aren't those dates?
No, the
voted
special
on?
meeting was scheduled today, so the
For
special
what?
meeting went out, it's in your calendar, you got an invite.
Yeah, the
So it's
15th.
the 15th, right?
You just said the 15th, okay.
No, the Monday and Tuesday
Yeah.
before our full commission meeting don't have any meetings, I don't think.
The Monday the 15th is the Monday you're talking about, right?
No, that's the next week is our.
Oh, the
full
very
commission-
first, the Monday right before.
Before
I see.
our special committee,
Okay.
yeah, before our full
Sorry,
commission
I
meeting
just-
this month, so that would be like the 21st or the 22nd.
22nd, the 23rd is the monitoring meeting. So the 22nd would be the best day.
Yeah, so there's still option for the 22nd, if you wanna put more time, you're not mandated to do that, because it's another week though, so.
What? Yeah, I know,
Just so you
so
know, I didn't receive anything. I didn't get an email.
let's not worry about that right now. It's just, I mean, we'll figure it out, but
It's, the invite's on the calendar, so you got the invite, right? I didn't even look.
no, I haven't looked on the calendar. So yeah, I think we need to adjourn. I mean, I don't know, we can extend a little bit. I have a babysitter issue, so.
I'm happy to stay and talk.
Yeah, I mean, if we're able to extend at least for a couple minutes, I got here at 6:05 and there was no opportunity for public comment then.
But it was.
No, we did.
we
Yeah,
did,
but I'm
you
saying
got
it was
here
5 minutes, yeah, I got here 5 minutes late and it was
Yes.
designated for a longer period of time than that. I'm just not feeling heard. I'm feeling like my fellow community members aren't feeling heard right now. So if we are able to take a couple more minutes, just so that people feel like they actually, I mean, people
This is-
spent
No,
time
I'm
doing this.
sorry, with all due respect, it says a second public.
Yeah, but what does the
comment
first
as
part
time-
say? It's a
as time
6
allowed.
to
Yeah, but there was no
6:20.
public
But there
comment.
was no-
Technically, we don't even have a meeting anymore, so.
Yeah, this is not a meeting,
Yeah.
so you can
it's
keep
not-
talking,
Okay.
so I think we could adjourn the meeting and keep talking.
Yeah.
Sorry, unpopular opinions. If we are serious about this, some of the things I don't
You
mind,
wanna
we
keep airing
discuss
it? You're gonna
after
keep
it's
airing it,
adjourned.
or what?
But some of the serious stuff I prefer, to be heard on the formal recording. So,
We can keep it going,
yeah,
but-
I know, we can still discuss after the meeting is formally adjourned. But I think if, certain things, we probably want the public to hear that through
Sure,
the
it's-
recording,
it's
so we can
recorded,
leave
yeah.
it to the next
That's
meeting
fine,
as
but
well.
you can-
They're gonna leave the recording on and adjourn the meeting, but leave the recording on so we can talk.
I mean, the meeting is already not a full meeting.
Oh, okay, if the recording is on, then I will then.
He's just saying he has to leave to relieve a babysitter, which is
Oh.
totally valid.
So, you know what,
Yeah.
I'm here, but it's,
Yeah.
yeah. So-
So, yeah, but I'll stay, and sounds like Martin's gonna stay, and
And we'll figure out the next meeting. We'll-
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
I didn't bring my blankie, but I'll stay a little bit longer.
Alright. However, one suggestion I will make right now, Martin, not only Martin, everybody, if you wanna write some serious, content, make sure you are hydrated and your blood sugar is not low.
thank you, Pete.
Sure, thank you.
I'm all ears.
Proceed.
Richard, you haven't spoken yet.
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of things I wanted to ask as the meeting was going. Oh, we're in the recording.
It's recording, so it's
Still recording.
live streaming rather.
So one, when you guys are having the conversation about limiting or
About what?
writing this down, scope, 2.6.2, scope of the CPC review. I saw that you guys really wanted to make sure that you made the point that you're showing that you're limiting yourselves, that you're limiting. And I understand that it's politically, it's correct, but the problem is that there are, in that sentence that you read, the word "and" was so important in that because it's "and" the commission believes the criminal violations may exist. When reading law, and as Martin understands this, the elements are based upon what the sentence says. You have to go through both sides of it. And if you don't have both sides, then you don't have anything. If you only have one side, then you don't have anything. So that's sort of, well, right here. It says, however, the CPC may refer cases directly to the city prosecutor for further investigation if IA has declined to review a matter for criminal violations and the commission believes that criminal violations may exist. This part is going to be really important as you go through this because, as Jason said, those are three primary things that you're going to see, but there are many, many more thefts and so on and so forth that don't get investigated. And I do understand Gary. The problem what you're going to run into is that if you get a case that IA has already investigated, that's the only time you're going to see the Garrity issue brought up because the prosecutor's office, they don't read Garrity. They only read Miranda. So you don't have to worry about that. You only have to worry about it coming from IA. So this is where you're going to have to look at your ability to say, oh, this came from IA. Oh, there was Garrity. We believe not only this happened, but yes, we believe it's criminal. Therefore, we're just going to bypass IA and we're going to take this straight to the prosecutor's office. I mean, it's a very easy fix that you guys built in there, but then you're starting to take it out. And it's like, no, leave it in there. You have your powers, use them. Don't limit yourself. The other thing that I saw, 2.6.4, preparing the case file for the accountability committee. It speaks to the executive director's team shall review the file for completeness. I don't know who that team is. I know it's very vague so that you can make a team at any time, but it doesn't necessarily state that it has to be employees. It doesn't state that it has to be.
Well, and the reason, because to your point about consultants, what if it's so big a case that we need to bring in a consultant, right?
Yes.
So in the future, we may have those, right? And it may be, so that's why a team is like that. To be
Okay.
honest with you, right? Because it includes if we hire outside help to assist with,
Exactly.
because it's too hard and there's too much work, or we have 15 cases, we get a really big one. So team is broad that way, so that, you know, the executive director has the right to enter into contracts on behalf of the CPC to move the business forward.
We put that in 115.5. I remember when we wrote that. I remember the day we wrote it.
Yeah.
So that's perfect segue into the next thing that I saw was over in 2.6.6 pre-hearing procedures. Briefs are due to the commission co-chairs via email at least 5 calendar days in advance of the hearing. I understand Commissioner Chandra wants to, Commissioner Benito, wants to increase that to 6 days. That's fine. When I was looking at this, my very first thought was when you guys start to see your very first case file, not case package, but just the case file, which is only one part of the package, that case file is about this wide. If you look at it on the paper side of it, it's about this wide. That's just on the case file. So when Commissioner Wong was saying that it took her 6 hours on a very small case, that was with her reading very quickly. It takes a long time to go through these case files. It's going to take a lot of, and this is one thing I spoke about to the other accountability members, you're going to have to figure out your capacity, because even with this 6 days, that you're looking at this based upon one case. I'm looking at this based upon 7 cases on that week. I don't know how many hearings you're going to have to schedule. I don't know what your capacity is going to be for how many cases you can hear in one hearing set. But when you're talking about sending out that group of cases, you're looking about 6 or 7 cases per, and then how much can each person read prior to the hearing? So these are some very real things that I was looking at that you really need to pay attention to as you go through the entire process. The last thing was what the chair was speaking about, the quorum issue. I believe you're looking at the number of the hearing. I think you guys actually put in your writing here where you can move yourself to be able to handle that by saying at least the majority of the commissioners present at the time. You don't have to lock yourself into saying that it has to be a quorum at that meeting. You can just say the commissioner is present at that time, which clears up all situations should you have recusals. Simple process. So, and that was all I had. So thank you.
And sorry, my turn. Some of the things Kayla and Richard, they mentioned it. I will go back to a particular topic we discussed. Sorry, not we. You guys discussed earlier. I was consider a particular thing all the commissioners should think about is one stone, two birds. Later, when you start hearing cases, some of them could be big and recent, And some of them could be really from a long time ago. Some of them maybe just not too big to begin with. So each case will take a different time frame for you to prepare. So combine all the ideas, which is from what I have observed. First of all, I wish we have more commissioners can be like Commissioner Wang, reading fast and check all the details. This is, I'm not joking. If community members think that you guys just browse through things and they will think that not only their voice is not heard in this case, if that's coincidentally somebody's case, and they will think that you have a bias towards them or something like discrimination or something. So I would recommend maybe there's a way we can say, in this case, we need an IHOC, doesn't matter, committee or even IHOC work group to help out the reading process or even with the evidence, all those things included. The other thing is, I'm glad you guys think about that. The commissioners probably, you don't know how many they have to recuse themselves, right? This is the reason why I would say one stone, two birds. You really have to think about the term Richard just mentioned as a team. We really need third party, the impartial legal consultant or legal advisors. I'm not saying having a lawyer right now working part of the time for the commission, part of the time for the city is wrong. However, when you start doing the real cases, that's the real, where the real job the commission is made for. You will have lots of arguments come up unexpectedly. You don't know from what corner. So you probably should think about getting a true impartial outside legal consultant as an advisor to start. So later when you get a bigger case, and maybe even two in the same time frame, like in 2 months or something like that, you can do exactly what Jason and Richard said. It will be easier to build a team to work on these things, which will be considered really impartial and helpful to the community and also to the police officers. Otherwise, later, you don't know, by any mistakes, later they will say, even Martin is working so hard right now, but just make sure you hydrate yourself, keep your blood sugar high, but still, later we don't know if one of the cases, or two of the cases come up and people will criticize saying, oh, commission's lawyer is discriminating or the commission's lawyer is whatever. So even we have a hardworking person right now to do the job, but later when we hear the real cases, it's a different level of the situation. We require legal expertise without dragging commissioner down for all other arguments at that time you wouldn't need because you would be so busy. You need to concentrate on these cases. So I would recommend people start thinking about that. So in that case, we build a foundation for the team Richard just mentioned, and we can get rid of the drawback which we may face at any time later when we start hearing cases as a regular thing. Routine work. Thank you.
Thank you.
We technically already adjourned, but we're just gonna officially adjourn with the video now. Thanks for anybody watching.
Kayla, did you?
Oh,
I thought
sorry.
I thought you wanted.
Do you have more?
I mean, I
Sorry, I thought you were
No, I just,
coming over.
yeah, you're good. Thank you.
If you wanna make comments,
No,
go for it.
no, I'm not being passive aggressive.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to be sure. I was like, wait, you were the one that wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, well, we could leave this on or off, but I felt super, super rushed. And I know that the comment period said on the agenda, I think it said 6:05 to 6:20. And I understand that we make adjustments if nobody's here to give public comment. But that being said, I literally got here at 6:06. And so it ends up being like, that's held against me. And I get that we could have had a so, and I felt like I spent time reading this, going over this stuff, and I didn't feel like the things that I said actually got considered. I feel like are immediately already gone. The suggestion that I made was like immediately responded to and kind of written off. So, and if you choose not to take my recommendation, it's fine. That's obviously, I think that's up to you guys, but I just, we spend time going through this stuff and I just felt super, rushed. I didn't feel heard, but, and I was also just aware of like, as just a general group of us wanting to be for that, so I didn't need to say anything else particularly. I made my point, hopefully it'll be considered more, in a more lengthy process than just saying no, to what I suggested, but if you say no, you say no. So, thank you, appreciate it.
No problem.
Oh, believe me, we are only here making public comments. We can suggest, but that doesn't mean we'll
Yeah.
always.
Absolutely, I'm aware.
Good business sticking around, huh?
And you get the public comment.
Oh, of course, see?
Commission holds the decision.
Next time, don't do that, Martin.